The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those knuckleheads of liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty. We're coming at you on October 19th, 2022. Always just slipping a little bit further into the abyss of the Biden administration. But today we want to talk with you about the propositions, because we're coming up on the elections, and who knows, maybe we can do a little to anchor ourselves from slipping further into that with these upcoming November elections. But before we get into that, let me introduce you to our panel. In our lower left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our lower right-hand corner, we have Tim Everett. He is our screaming eagle of freedom. He is a pilot here in the state of California. And in our upper right-hand corner, we have a special guest today. We have Susan Shelley, who is a columnist and editorial writer for the Southern California News Group, which features papers like the Orange County Register and the Los Angeles Daily News. And we'll get some of her opinions on some of these things as well today. So let's jump right into it. The propositions, there are 7 of them to go through today, and we'll just go through them in numerical order. So this is the voter's guide that's up there that the state puts up. So, you're encouraged to go check that out if you want to learn more about these beyond what you hear us talk about. But the first and foremost is the number 1, the proposition 1, and that is the constitutional right to reproductive freedom. And it is a legislative constitutional amendment. So this isn't just, pushing something as a new law here. This is going to have constitutional weight in the state if they get this thing passed. And of course, we've had spirited debates on abortion on this show before. So let's kind of dig into what this one means. This is also coming with the background of the recent Supreme Court decision. I think that's why the legislators put it on the ballot. I think they wanted to make a statement, essentially saying that, hey, this is what California is about here, beyond just saying that, hey, we're now an abortion sanctuary or paradise, I guess you could say, where they're talking about paying people to come here to get their abortions. But anyways, constitutional amendment for libertarians, that doesn't necessarily sound like a bad thing. What do you guys think about this one?
Well, I'll let Susan go first on this.
Okay, well, what this does is, as you said, it's a constitutional amendment, and a constitutional amendment overrides state laws that conflict with it. And the specific state laws that conflict with Proposition 1 that would be overridden are the limits on abortion after viability. Current California law, which was not changed by the Supreme Court decision, that had no effect in California, current California law says that abortion is not legal after the point of viability of the fetus, as determined by the physician. Not legal after viability, except to protect the life or health of the mother. That's state law, and has been for quite a while. Proposition 1 overrides that, and what that says is there is a fundamental constitutional right to choose to have an abortion, period. No questions, no requirements.
Uh-oh, sounds like Susan has frozen again. Hopefully we'll be able to get her back. Did one of you guys want to jump in on this while we're waiting to see if
I will. Okay, well, I mean...
hold on. Susan's back.
Susan's back. Okay,
Susan. There you go.
I don't know why it's doing that.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, you got frozen out just as you were letting us know about how the viability is part of the law, right. that they can't have an abortion after that, but and then I think you were going to get into how this would potentially upend that.
Okay, so current state law says that abortion's not legal in California after viability except to protect the life or health of the mother. But what Prop 1 says, and it would override that state law, is there is a fundamental constitutional right to choose to have an abortion, period. So that means that California would be legalizing abortion without any limits at all, right up to the moment of birth. That is absolutely what it will do. And This is not what they're saying it will do. The people who put this on the ballot, the legislators in the Assembly, in the state Senate, they're insisting that all this measure does is constitutionalize current law, but that's wrong. It is not the same as current law. It overrides current law. And the difference is it doesn't have any limits on when an abortion can take place or why. No limits at all. And I'll tell you how I know that this is the case. At the editorial board of the Southern California News Group, we meet with the different groups that are proposing constitutional amendments or proposing ballot measures of any kind. We met with the people who are supporting Prop 1. And I showed them the arguments in the voter guide, which has now been mailed to every California voting household. That's the newsprint book that has all the fine print in it about all the propositions. The arguments that were submitted against Prop 1 state that it legalizes abortion all the way up to the moment of birth. No questions asked. It says that over and over again. We met with them during the period of time when you could still go to court and challenge an argument that had been submitted for false statements or misleading statements, because there's a public inspection period on all these documents. Everything that's going to be in the ballot materials is on display for public inspection and subject to court-ordered changes. So anyone can file a lawsuit and say, this is a false statement, this is a misleading statement, this cannot be sent to the voters to explain this measure. So I asked the proponents of Prop 1, I showed them what had been submitted. It was August 9th and the deadline was August 15th to go to court. I showed them what had been said, legalizes abortion all the way up to the moment of birth. And I asked them, who is going to court to get these so-called misleading statements taken out of the voter guide? Silence. And nobody went to court. Nobody went to court to challenge it.
Did they accuse you of misinformation?
They were trying. They were
normal
trying
course.
to, but it's the fact of what this will do. And several legal professors from Berkeley Law, wrote something on a blog about it and advised them of all the different legal consequences that could result from the wording that they had put in place. But they were in such a hurry to get this on the ballot for November 22 because there was a poll that showed that independent voters and I guess Democratic voters who might not otherwise bother to vote would come out if they felt that abortion rights were endangered and this would protect abortion rights. There was a poll that showed it would help turnout. And they wanted that for the congressional races. They want to turn out voters. You can see it in the commercials that are running all around the state where there are contested congressional races that the Democratic candidates are saying abortion, 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 as if it's threatened in California, but abortion rights are not threatened in California. Nothing has changed in this state, and nothing will change unless Prop 1 passes, which is a big change and not in a good way.
You know, my problem with this proposition is more fundamental than all of this, okay? I find it very offensive that they even call this thing abortion, they call it reproductive rights or reproductive freedom. I mean, dear God, we are talking about the life of something that will develop into you or me or any one of the people on this panel speaking right now. But this whole thing about abortion and the so-called rights to kill your unborn is nothing but based upon a lie. The woman, we always see this, no offense intended here, Susan, I said woman. We always see the sign that says, my body, my choice. But it's not her body you're talking about. You're talking about the body of the child. So this is my fundamental disagreement. So all of these propositions, this proposition, particular proposition number 1, I am going to vote against it on that basis. That is a lie. This whole abortion debate is a lie. We cannot have the right to end the life of an entity that is not our own life. We cannot have that right.
Well, let me explain, if anyone listening to this podcast is pro-choice and favors the current law in California, let me explain how Prop 1 could endanger the current law in California. Suppose it passes, and suppose somewhere in this state of 40 million people, someone wants an abortion at 8.5 months into a pregnancy. And let's say the father of that child wants to stop that from happening and goes to federal court and is granted standing, because after all, the father is an individual with the right to reproductive freedom as well, It's not written woman, man. It's written individual, very politically correct language, which includes both genders, all genders. Whoever you are, if you're pregnant, you have the right to reproductive
all
freedom.
700 genders.
All 700 genders.
Yes.
So let's say someone is granted standing in federal court to get an injunction to stop an abortion in the late months of pregnancy. This could go all the way to the Supreme Court at the speed of lightning as an emergency. And you could end up with a decision that grants personhood to a fetus for the first time in American legal history. That could happen. Now, why hasn't it happened so far? Well, late-term abortion has never been legal so far, but this would make it legal. And is it going to go unchallenged? I don't think it will go unchallenged.
Yes.
And the other threat, that Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina has introduced legislation in the United States Senate that would ban abortion nationally after 15 weeks. He doesn't have the votes to pass that. But what if California passes Prop 1 and there's a horrible story that goes across the country about a late-term abortion? How much does that move public opinion in all those states where the individual senators have to think about what their voters think back at home?
Yeah.
How much does it move those votes? It could result in legislation to ban abortion. It could result in a Supreme Court decision that bans abortion. Late-term abortion is not supported by the majority of the American people. And even in California, people don't support it, but they don't know that that's what this does. They're going to find out. If they pass it, they're going to find out. And it could endanger abortion rights nationally.
And the reason they don't know about it is the rebuttal to the claim that it would do this potential damage to, or that it would allow late-term abortions. That has been erroneously answered in the ballot information that every voter gets. Is that correct? Is that the reason why?
It's very carefully worded. If you take a look at the rebuttal to the argument against, it says something like, don't be fooled by misinformation. But it doesn't say which statement is misinformation. It says, don't fall for scare tactics. But it doesn't say which statement is scare tactics. So you couldn't go to court to challenge their rebuttal because they didn't specifically tie it to a fact that they were saying was wrong. So it's very deceptive. And I think it's unfortunate.
But this is just the point. This is just the point. Look at what we're talking about. We're talking about reproductive freedom. Okay? When in truth and in fact, we're talking about the right to end the life of the unborn. That's what we're talking about. But how is it classified on the proposition? I have it right here in front of me. We are talking about codifying reproductive freedom. How in God's name reproductive freedom could mean killing your unborn child? So this is just the point. This is where it is deceptive. You're correct. I totally agree. Susan, you have more explanations than I do. This is why this thing is deceptive and dishonest from the very beginning.
Yeah.
It's going to be very interesting in the courts if this passes. We haven't heard the end of it. This will not just be some resolution that's meaningless that's passed by our legislature. If this becomes part of the Constitution of California, we haven't heard the end of it. We're just at the beginning.
Indeed.
And I have to go on record to say that my feelings about this are mirrored exactly by Leon's feelings on this matter.
Well, I shall throw in the only discord voice here. Not that I'm necessarily for the passage of this, but as far as just for the whole abortion debate in general from the libertarian position, which is actually kind of split on this issue. As far as there's a fair amount of libertarians who are for it. It's more about the viability issue, is I think where most of them draw the line, because certainly if a person could be delivered, then a lot of them would be for that. But there's the woman's right to her own body as well. But one of the things that I take away too from the general abortion debate is the idea that if we give the government the right to police pregnancies, so essentially going through and we just saw what they did with COVID. So certainly if you could say that, hey, you're taking a risk with that kid, oh my gosh, I mean, they could literally be in family's business all the way from day one as well. But that's not really what's at stake here, because like you said, Susan, that it's already legal here. So
it's already legal here. But suppose hypothetically, a case goes to the Supreme Court and you get a personhood ruling, which we've never had before. Well, what would be the consequences of that legally? I mean, could you say that a fetus has property rights to inherit? Could you say that that someone who is drinking alcohol during a pregnancy is guilty of child endangerment? What happens in the law if personhood is granted to a fetus? And that could happen, because it's hard to imagine that if someone challenged a late-term abortion, went to the Supreme Court to enjoin that process, it's hard to imagine that this Supreme Court wouldn't find a way to stop that abortion from happening.
Yeah.
Well, given the Dobbs decision, I think I will have to agree with you. Yes.
Yeah. I'm just saying we've seen what a Fauci will do as far as taking away our liberties for health and safety. And oh my God, if you gave that, the fetus personhood rights, we might never see the end of government's power during a pregnancy.
These things have a way of having unintended consequences.
Indeed. And Jason, if we were not talking about the prepositions, I would have gone after you on that statement. But it's okay. I'll let it pass. You'll slide on that one.
Well, we better get on to the other ones, or I'm afraid we just won't make it to them. But the next two are both related to gambling. And one of the thoughts too, and I should have brought this up at the beginning, but we should take, every time somebody proposes a law, we should put them to the standard of Carl Sagan, which is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So give us the extraordinary evidence of why you need these laws. And we see some kind of odd laws here for 26 and 27. One of them, they're both are about gaming. So one of them is put up by the Indian tribes in general, I believe, and that one is it's essentially to allow sports wagering in the Indian casinos, and I believe that may also be at the racetracks as well. Let me see if that one is the
yes, that's right.
Case
it's four privately owned racetracks.
Yeah.
Only four.
And so that's kind of an interesting one, because on the other side of that, 27 is a special one that's tied in with the online apps like Sports Kings and stuff, and they have made an arrangement with several Indian tribes, some of the major ones, to essentially cut everybody else out of the deal and just be able to do it online through these apps. And as a libertarian, I'm thinking, why the heck do we need either of these? Why can't we just let people be free to gamble without all these?
That's a very good question, and I'll explain to you why California just won't let people be free. I think it was 2018 when the Supreme Court said that sports betting can be legal in every state. It can't just be New Jersey and Nevada. It can be legal in every state. Many states have legalized it. California could legalize it through the legislature, like a legislature is supposed to do. They could debate it. They could work it out. They could figure out what the taxes would be. They could legalize sports betting, set up a regulatory regime, whatever they wanted to do, they could do through the normal representative government processes that we all learn in school. But no, they would rather just take campaign contributions from all parties and not do anything. So what these two measures are doing, these are put on the ballot by these groups to try and cut out all the competition except themselves. So 26 is just this group of tribal casinos. These Indian tribes are the only ones who would be allowed to offer sports wagering, except for 4 horse race tracks where they cut a deal. And that's it. No online sports betting in California at all, just in person at these facilities only. And just because they hate competition so much, they put in a Private Attorney General Act type of provision where private lawyers could sue the card rooms. There are several card rooms in the LA area and up and down the state where these gambling is legal, regulated by the state. These tribal casinos don't like the competition. So they put in this provision that allows private lawyers to sue to enforce the gaming regulations in place of the state. That obviously leads to the possibility of shakedown lawsuits, because if you're sued for something, even if the suit is frivolous, it's usually cheaper to settle it than to fight it. So it creates this incentive, this financial incentive to file questionable lawsuits against these card rooms, which would harass them financially. And it's just completely anti-competitive. That's 26. 27 is almost the same thing from these big gaming platform companies. They want to cut everybody else out also. So they made a deal with some of the tribal casinos, and their offer to the people of California is, in order to offer sports betting, you would have to put up $100 million in front and have casino licenses in something like 10 other states and make a deal with a tribal casino in order to offer online gaming in California. So no one else could do it but them. Even if Elon Musk came along and said, I have, money, no object, I want to offer sports betting in California, he couldn't do it unless he had casino licenses in however many other states. To me, the $100 million wouldn't be a problem. The casino licenses would take a little longer. He wouldn't bother. So it's anti-competitive again. And as libertarians, you'll love this part. It includes data surveillance of sports betting in California. Prop 27 does, so that the Attorney General can enforce the laws against offshore gambling and can watch for problem gambling. Well, how are they going to do that? They're surveilling everybody's sports betting and reporting the data to the Attorney General's office. What could go wrong? So it's kind of creepy. It's not necessary. The legislature could just legalize sports betting like the other states have done, but they would rather not and just keep collecting giant campaign contributions from all concerned.
I just, this whole thing, I just don't like. You see this distinction that we keep making between what could happen on the Indian reservations, the tribal reservations, versus what could happen outside the reservations. This identity politics that has been in our laws here for a long time is now being enforced through these amendments, because in Prop 27, I think they're going to allow the Indian tribal casinos to offer sports betting and all kind of stuff outside of tribal lands, but nobody else could.
Right.
So you are really and truly segregating. We're going back here to Jim Crow. We're really and truly segregating our citizens based upon whether they're part of an Indian reservation versus whether they're a non-Indian living outside the reservation. And this to me is horrible. Quite frankly, it's horrible.
Well, it would probably be antitrust if it wasn't going to be in the California law and constitution. It would probably be subject to antitrust because it's clearly carving up the market and keeping everybody else out.
There you go. Yes, sir.
Well, the sad thing too is as far as the differences go, though, Leon, some of these were made by essentially when they gave these tribes essentially the treaties that they gave them to be autonomous to some degree. Certainly that can allow them to be a little bit different from us. But why do we take the anti-liberty approach as United States citizens to say we're not going to be free, but we're going to allow them to be free? I mean, if what's keeping us from saying we want to be free? I just don't get it.
It's the deal. It's the deal they made. It's the deal they made to make gambling legal only on these tribal reservations, and then it's subject to these constant negotiations of the compacts. And there's a ton of money at stake. Lots and lots of campaign contributions at all levels of government. They donate heavily even in smaller offices because it's a farm team. Eventually those people will get to something else. Some of them will. And there's just like an unlimited fount of money for electing people who are sympathetic to one side or the other about gaming regulations and dividing up the markets. So it's not the pretty part of American government, that's for sure.
Well, Susan, if you had to make a bet, do you think either of those will pass?
It looks like they're poisoning the water for each other with a fortune in advertising. It's like no on this, no on that, no on that, no on this, and every commercial is no. And I think probably they'll both go down.
Okay. We didn't ask you what about Proposition 1? I know we left that a little while ago. Do you think it's going to pass, by the way?
The polls show that it will. I'm not sure that the polls are capturing all the activity that's going on in the churches and other groups that are a little bit below the radar of pollsters. the word might get out and people might vote no, but every poll indicates that it's going to pass. And people are really being lied to by the Governor Newsom and by the legislative leaders. They're really being lied to about what this will do and what it means for California. So it's possible that it will pass just on misinformation. And if it does, the only way to fix it is to go back to the ballot and fix it, because it's a state constitutional amendment. And the only thing that fixes that is another state constitutional amendment. It would have to go on the ballot again. So it's nothing that the legislature could fix. The federal courts could override it, use the U.S. Constitution to say, sorry, California, you can't have this.
Yeah.
That could happen. But short of that, if anybody wants to make changes in it, back to the ballot.
Okay. Well, that certainly, sounds, gosh, ominous, all this misinformation, Doc, but I guess that's just part and parcel of having these elections and stuff. It's the misinformation we're always hearing, but especially from politicians. But moving along to 28, that should be a relatively easy one, at least for liberty-minded people. This one provides additional funding for arts and music education in public schools. And the idea is, well, if you want additional arts and music, why can't we just have school choice and you choose a school that has more arts and music? I don't understand why we need to have this thing that's going to force all spending to be a little more toward that. But it also sounds like it's a little bit of a shell game too, because this may just be a little bit way to get a little more money in there so that the teachers can divvy that up for their pays. What do you guys think about
You
this?
know what would be a good idea? You know what would be a good idea? If these people stop teaching all the garbage about gender equality and transgender and all the other crap they're teaching our kids, they're not teaching them reading, writing, and arithmetic. If they stop spending money on all this other crap, we'll have money to do this music and this other stuff that they want to do. They don't need the taxpayers to put up more money so that they could spend the money on propaganda, pushing propaganda on our children. They certainly don't need it. So I say no and hell no to this proposition.
Well, in a perfect world. Sorry, go ahead.
Just when my kids went through school, they were beginning to cut back on those art and music programs. To my dismay at the time, and that of my kids, although they had the opportunity to through high school go stay in the band and jazz band programs, for example. But it was touted as the reaction to constraints in the budgets and so on and so forth within the schools, and so they didn't have enough money anymore so the first programs they cut are sports and arts and music. And so then I guess they notice, hey, maybe we ought to have those things back in here. Let's just get more money. And so what used to work no longer worked, and now they just need more money. So I don't know what the answer is, but this rubs me the wrong way, like Leon, like it rubs Leon the wrong way.
Well, let me explain why someone might support it.
Okay.
As you said, taxpayers have been told over and over again, if you don't vote for this tax increase, we're going to cut arts and music. What this does is try to end that game. This is $1 billion a year. It's a formula, but it's about $1 billion a year out of the general fund, in addition to the other education spending that's mandated under Prop 98 and the rest of the laws. So it's $1 billion extra devoted to arts and music programs, can't be canceled, can't be spent on anything else, can't be diverted to some other priority. It sort of ends that game of, we're going to cut the funding for arts and music unless you raise your taxes. I think in that respect, it's an understandable effort to keep these good programs, enrichment programs in the schools, in all the public schools, district schools and charter schools in California. It dedicates the funding. So it's music, it's art, it's also things like computer animation, video game design. These fall into the category of both arts and good career opportunities in California. And a lot of kids who would not have the opportunity to be exposed to that will be exposed to it because of this funding. So I think it creates benefits long-term for the children who go to school in California, and it's not a tax increase. So for those reasons, I think it can be justified. But a lot of people don't like ballot box budgeting, and they worry that, yes, you'll have the $1 billion for arts and music, and they'll cut shop and vocational. Or they'll say, well, you took all our money for arts and music, we're raising your taxes for something else. But the game in Sacramento is, there's never been more funding for education than there is now, and yet it's still never enough, because the teachers union and the other public employee unions, or as the politicians call them, our labor partners, they want raises, better benefits, more money, more people in the union. They want all of this with the money that taxpayers are putting up for education, which is why it doesn't get into the classroom. It's going into the salaries.
Yes.
But one thing to push back on that, Susan, is it says additional funding. And so it talks about a $1 billion, I guess, additional funding impact to the state as far as fiscal. So at least initially, it would potentially give them a little money to play with for teacher salary, I would think, at least in that first, year or two of this. And then after that, I would guess it's, a constant thing at that point, right? Where it's
well,
you could potentially see the benefits of this thing, Susan. I agree with you on the benefits. I think the solution is wrong. That's all. I think the solution is what Jason said: school choice, and who want to get the arts and the music, let them go someplace, let them go wherever they want to do that. Choose school choice.
If only we could get school choice.
See, that's the problem, is that the teachers union runs politics in California. The California Teachers Association donates more to politicians than any other group or collection of groups. Yeah. And as a result, they control the decisions in Sacramento. And school choice, there were several attempts to get that on the ballot in 2022, but they were severely opposed by the teachers union. If they had made the ballot, there would have been probably $100 million spent to defeat them. And the people who were promoting school choice couldn't match that kind of spending. So it's a very difficult challenge. So in this environment, in a non-perfect world, what's the best way to get those programs to these kids for, the limited number of years that they're in public school? You don't want to make them wait for 30 years. They'll be out of school. So what's the best way to do it? I think if you leave that $1 billion in the general fund, it would find its way into pay raises for the prison guards or the highway patrol or some other group. Essentially, the legislature would spend it on something less valuable than this. So in a non-perfect world, maybe this is an improvement.
Yeah. So this is the non-perfect world. More money, Bill.
But it's not a tax increase. Definitely is not a tax increase.
Susan, I will accept your argument in support of the proposition, but I'm still going to vote against it.
Okay. Fair enough.
Okay, well, let's jump on to 29, which is the medical. This is for kidney dialysis. It requires on-site medical professionals there, and they've tried to get this in various forms, I think, over and over again through the propositions, and I guess they're trying it again. It's just from a liberty perspective, it almost seems like, well, is there anything that's keeping one of these from having a medical professional there? And if so, you could just sort of choose to go to one that has a medical professional. I don't know why we need a law that forces all of them to have that, but what do you guys think on this one?
This thing is supported by the unions, okay? And there is a reason for that. They're looking for members, okay? So I'm going to vote against it. This is pure union propaganda. That's all it is. And if you look at the ads they're running on TV right now, they're talking about all kind of things, all the dangers if we don't have all these new medical professionals in those facilities and all that kind of stuff and things like that. That is what they're telling us. All this nice thing, wonderful things is going to happen if only we could get more people working in these facilities where they could unionize them. That's all that's going on here. No, exactly, and hell no.
Yeah, Leon's exactly right. It's just a union trying to harass the companies that it wants to unionize. It wants to unionize the workforces of these clinics. It's a health workers union, and this is the third time they've paid to collect the signatures to put it on the ballot.
Exactly.
And they're just harassing the companies into spending millions of dollars on TV ads to say no on whatever number it is this year. This is the third time they've tried it. There's no purpose other than to harass the companies, and it's really an abuse of the initiative process at this point.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think this one is a collective hell no.
Hell no. Yeah.
There we go. Okay, well, let's jump on to the next one. And of course, it wouldn't be California if there was not a proposition that says, let's get the richies. This one is called Provides Funding for Programs to Reduce Air Pollution and Prevent Wildfires by Increasing Tax on Personal Income over $2 million. So essentially, it's the fair share deal for whatever our pet project is at the moment.
Which at the rate of inflation, we'll all be making $2 million.
There you go. That's the plan. You figured it out.
That's right. We're all rich.
We're all going to be billionaires. Oh my God.
Well, let me explain the history on this one. The California Air Resources Board, in trying to implement the governor's mandate to move to electric cars, zero emission vehicles, came up with a rule that said all the rideshare companies have to have 90% of the miles they drive zero emission by 2030. And the rideshare companies said, okay, well, our drivers drive their own cars. And who's going to pay for the cars? And the legislature said, don't look at us. And the air quality regulator said, don't look at us. And the stockholders said, don't look at us. So Lyft spent about $15 million to put this on the ballot. And it says clean air, but actually it's just electric vehicle subsidies. And electric vehicles don't really clean the air if you count the emissions from the fossil fuel driven electricity generation, but that's another story. If you only look at the tailpipes, there are fewer emissions from electric cars, and this would raise a ton of money. It's an increase of the income tax rate by another 1.75% for high earners, $2 million and above. That would make the state income tax rate in California, already the highest in the country, it would make it 15.05%. State income tax in California. People can leave, they can go to another state where the income tax rate is zero, and they can stop paying taxes in California altogether. And if enough people do that, the rest of us are in trouble. But essentially what this does is it raises taxes to subsidize the purchase of electric vehicles, the construction of charging infrastructure, and just enough wildfire funding to make it look attractive on the ballot. And that's Prop 30.
And if those
Susan, I know you said.
I was just going to say, if those rich people leave, they might take their electric vehicles with them.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But I know you said we should stay and fight for freedom and liberty in California. But some of these propositions just make you want to vote with your feet and find other places to live.
It's pretty discouraging, I have to say. It's not cheerful reading. The ballot is not cheerful reading.
Perhaps Newsom's next project will be to electrify all the U-Hauls. Just so he can see all these clean vehicles leaving the state and heading toward other states.
We really power the state with natural gas and imported electricity. And he's just pretending that we run on solar panels and breezes. We don't really. Especially at night. We don't run on solar panels and breezes. We run on natural gas and imported electricity. And how is the imported electricity generated? We don't ask. We don't want to know.
Right.
So, could be coal, could be anything.
Well, in all fairness, though, I mean, they do have, I guess, regulations to require that there's a certain mix on the grid. So it's clean. It's supposed to be greener in California than in a lot of other states. But even then, you're literally sucking the green energy out of other states.
Well, if you go to CAISO.com, CAISO.com, that's the California Independent System Operator. They operate the grid. You can click the link that says today's outlook, and you can see the demand and you can see the supply, and you can see it at high noon when the sun is up, and you can see it at 8 o'clock at night when it isn't. And it's very instructional. It's a real reality check to see that batteries are producing almost nothing. And even then, just for a few hours, by 7:30 at night, they're starting to peter out. And by midnight, there is zero. So we're
You mean batteries or solar cells?
Batteries, the big banks of commercial industrial scale batteries that the state has been buying to supposedly make solar energy work at night.
Right.
Not even close. Not even like 1% of what we get.
Exactly.
Is from batteries. And we're getting on any given moment, between 25% and 60% from natural gas. And all those plants are slated for closure.
Yes.
Well,
I have
and
worked
the nuclear plants too, as
And
well.
the
I mean,
nuclear plants.
they just recently saved the last one temporarily, but
Yeah.
they
With
shut down the other
$1.4
one.
billion of your money.
They're going to try to save, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
I'm just
nuclear is 9% of what we use
yeah.
in the state.
Exactly. You just talk about taking energy from other states and all that kind of stuff and things like that. Well, I've worked in energy for a long time, okay? I can just tell you this and we're gonna leave it at that. We could argue about it another day. All of that stuff that the Energy Commission and so the data that they put out is nothing but a bunch of garbage. I can tell you that.
And I could
word.
Tell you. That's the last word, final word, last word. But the thing that I could say is that Susan's not that I'm thinking about leaving anytime soon, but Susan's not exactly blowing up my skirt about staying and fighting the good fight.
Well, this is a depressing list.
Well, it'll all be over soon. They're probably all going down to defeat, so it'll all be over soon. We'll be on to the next election.
Yeah, there is that. I mean, that's a stay and fight type outcome.
Yes.
Well,
all right, what do we got?
Fortunately, we're just about at the end of the proposition, so we have
we're at
the last
41 minutes here. So
yes.
Let's talk about flavored tobacco products.
Yes, the last busybody motion here, and that's essentially.
So the legislature passed a ban on the sale of flavored tobacco products to anyone in California, not just to children. They're already illegal for children, but any sale at all of flavored tobacco products. The legislature passed it, the governor signed it. Now, we have direct democracy powers in California and have had them since 1911. We have the recall, everybody knows about that. We have the initiative, where the voters can write and pass laws without the legislature. And we have the referendum. The referendum is the power to reject laws that the government has enacted. And that's what this is. This is a referendum on the law that was passed to ban the sale of flavored tobacco. So when you vote on a referendum, you stand in the shoes of the legislature and you vote on the law yourself, as if you're the legislature and somebody's put this on the floor and you're voting on it. Do you want this law, this ban on flavored tobacco? If you do, vote yes. If you don't, vote no. That's how a referendum works.
Okay. Well, hey, at least it's giving
us a choice. So what are we going to vote? Is everybody voting no as libertarians to allow the retail sale of flavored tobacco products?
I'm voting no because, among other things, there's $100 million of tax revenue that would be lost if the sale of these products was ended, and you'd probably be financing more criminal activity as people brought them in from other states.
Correct. Oh my goodness. Oh, the reality check.
Creating more crimes that will create more criminal records that then someone will want to decriminalize because we don't want everything to be a crime in California, wrecking people's lives over minor things for years to come. So I think it's kind of
a... don't belong in California, Susan. You're in the world of reality and not this fantasy world that these nincompoops like to imagine.
Well, the same lawmaker who wants to legalize hallucinogens like mushrooms, he's the one who wants to ban the flavored tobacco products. And he doesn't even see any inconsistency in that.
I think about the whole thing with beer versus marijuana and the idea that, some people could be for one being legal and the other being illegal. And there's less of a difference with this. I mean, this is just the flavor. It's literally the same drug.
Exactly.
Right. Yes.
Exactly. And the premise is that only children like flavor, but at one time only children liked Halloween, and now everybody's buying costumes and decorating their houses.
Exactly.
So you can't really say what people like.
Yeah.
Well, we had a lot of fun on that one. Did we have enough time for the Knucklehead Noise Patrol? It would take about 3 or 4 minutes, or did you guys want to wrap it up now because we're a little bit over?
Hey, let's go. We're gonna bash Joe Biden.
Okay. Never pass up an opportunity.
Never.
Okay.
That's not even debatable.
So Knucklehead Noise Patrol, we always like to end on something funny that somebody has said in the media or a politician. And my gosh, so we're talking about old demented Joe, and he recently was interviewed by Jake Tapper on CNN, and maybe we can get the visual of this up to James. So he was interviewed back on October 11th, And they've been talking about nuclear war. They've literally been talking about, Putin's been talking about potentially going to nuclear weapons. And Joe Biden was asked, well, would you have a conversation with Putin if he wants to talk to you at the G20 that's coming up in November? And what he said is, look, I have no intention of meeting with him. But for example, if he came to me at the G20 and said, I want to talk about the release of Griner, I would meet with him. And of course, Griner is a WNBA basketball player who happens to meet all of the identity politics ideas that are big with Biden. She's a woman of color and she happens to be a lesbian. And it's just like, okay, that I'm sure it sounds terrible what's happening to her, but we're talking about apocalypse here, and you're not going to talk about it with the leader of the other country.
Are you ready for us to start out this? Because I want to get the first shot in. I want to fire the first
Absolutely.
Salvo. Okay. So Jason likes to wax philosophic with the term "democracy dies with Democrats." Well, apparently, diplomacy dies with Democrats as well. So yeah, here you are. You've got some woman who, and when you look, if you're in Rome, do as the Romans do. And if you're going to Russia, where they have it against the law, and it's not a friendly nation to law breakers, it behooves you to follow the letter of the law. And she deserves prison, not for carrying marijuana with her into a country that bans it, but for being so stupid to bring marijuana into a country that bans it, okay? She deserves 4 years for stupidity is what she deserves, okay? So I don't care about her right now.
Well, they gave her 9, so that's
nine she got.
Yeah, okay, well, an additional 5 years for being stupider than most people. I don't know, but anyway. So then on the flip side of it is that this freaking idiot Biden, who has done everything he could to promulgate, and I'm talking about throughout his senatorial and vice presidential terms, to promulgate this encroachment upon Russia by NATO and all these background things that people forget about. And when history begins, whatever happened 2 months ago at the earliest, and they forget about all the history behind this Ukrainian-Russian conglomeration of two corrupt nations duking it out with each other. And so, this guy is helping to put us on a precipice of severe war, potentially with good. I know there's debates about whether it will ever happen. Okay, I'm glad you have such a clear crystal ball. Mine's a little fuzzy, and I'm a little scared, I have to tell you. And so, if this idiot Biden is going to shut down any potential talks with an adversary, diplomatic talks, even if asked to do it, because I'm not going to talk about Ukraine without Ukraine there. Well, guess what? If it wasn't for us, Ukraine would already been taken over by Russia. Okay, so it's not Ukraine, it's us. It's us and them, Russia. And so if you're going to be an idiot like this and talk about this nonsense about this, this vote getting this person that is there on her own mistake, then you do not deserve to hold the office of president, you moron.
Well, let's give the man some credit, okay? He have his priorities straight, okay? He can with his identity politics in the forefront of his mind, he know that is more important than risking nuclear war for the entire planet. So poor Joe, he doesn't have all his cognitive faculties all together, but he have his priorities straight. He know that identity politics is more important than nuclear war. Okay, so give the guy a break.
Thank you, Leon. I feel so much better now. I'll be going I'll be standing out here watching the flash. I'll be naked in front of my house with my arms open wide toward the direction of San Diego Harbor, where the first nuclear weapon will blast. And I will gladly sacrifice myself for the political aspirations of Joe Biden.
Well,
I will be naked.
You'll be naked. Oh God. Okay.
Yeah. Well, nobody's going to care in a few seconds. So what's the deal, right?
Well, I'm going to kick it over to Susan. Did you have any thoughts? And also, too, did you want to tell us a little bit, too? I forgot to mention that you're also the Vice President of Communications of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. So if you wanted to say anything about that on your way out, too, for the show.
Sure. Well, I fight for taxpayers all over the place. There's just not enough. There's not enough conservative taxpayer advocates to go around. So I fight for taxpayers as a columnist and editorial writer at the Southern California News Group, and also as Vice President of Communications for the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. And you can be a member of HJTA. It's a membership organization. A lot of people don't know that. And for just $15 a year, you can strengthen the voice of taxpayers in California and help things.
And here's a link, too, for that as well, just so you guys can see that, the $15 a year. So
yeah. And you protect Prop 13, keep property taxes under control in California. Prop 13 also has a provision that requires local taxes to go on the ballot for voter approval. So that's a set of brakes on some of the craziest stuff that they want to do in government. So there's still a lot of work to do in California, but this is a great place, and we're not going to give it up to socialism. We're just not. So join HJTA and fight with us, fight for freedom and fight for lower taxes and fight for your property, your life, your right to your liberty. Fight for it.
You got to fight. There just aren't enough U-Hauls.
The waiting list is longer and longer.
Especially there's not enough electric U-Hauls.
There you go. Well, thanks again so much, Susan, for joining us. And thank you, all of you, for listening out there. And until the next time, stay free.
Yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.